Hi, in this video we are going to do a first chapter of geography, that is resources and development. In this lesson we will explore the concept of resources, to which you have already been introduced in your previous standards, I think, and their classification and the various ways in which they can be developed sustainably. So let's begin with resources. We'll take the definition first of it. Everything available in an environment which can be used to satisfy our needs, provided it is technologically accessible, economically feasible, and culturally acceptable. So now this is the definition that you'll have to remember, complete definition, and let us try to understand each of these words. Everything available in an environment which can be used to satisfy our needs. So far this is the definition you have been learning up to 8th standard. You have had this definition so far, okay, which means that everything that is having some use, some utility or value, that is called a resource. Example, table, your plate, blackboard, pen, which you use for, it is giving you some, what is the utility, you can write, mobile for making calls, etc. Okay, now let us further add to this definition few more words. That is, it is called a resource provided it is technologically accessible, understand the words, economically feasible and culturally acceptable. What does this mean? Let us understand. Let us take each word. Now, when we say technically accessible, this means that the resource is physically available and can be reached by the intended beneficiaries. For example, if the resource in question is clean water, right, it must be available in a location that is accessible to the people who need it. You must have the technology which can, through which the water can reach you, right? There should be some technology. Only then it is of some use, otherwise it is of no use. And the infrastructure necessary to transport and distribute the water must be in place. Okay, same way you can say for gold. One should be able to use technology and extract it from the earth with the use of technology. Right? So this is the meaning of technically accessible. Let us see the second word, economically feasible. This means the cost of accessing the resource is affordable for the intended beneficiaries. That is, for example, if the resource in question is healthcare, it must be available at a cost that people can afford. Right? Again, if you talk of gold, if the cost of extracting gold from the earth is very high compared to the cost of selling it, then it makes no sense in spending so much money on extracting it. It means it is not economically feasible. Right? And lastly, culturally acceptable. This means that the resource is appropriate and acceptable within the cultural context of the intended beneficiaries. For example, if the resource in question is education, it must be delivered in a way that is culturally appropriate and respectful of the local customs and traditions. It must be relevant to the needs and aspirations of the local community. Same way, supposing under your school you have a lot of coal, right? You have a school set up since so many years over here, okay, and suddenly one fine day somebody comes and says there's a lot of gold here and we need to demolish these school buildings and all. So will that be acceptable to the community? Certainly not, right? So this is the meaning of culturally acceptable. So you have the complete definition. Overall, resources that are technically accessible, economically feasible and culturally acceptable are those that are most likely to be successfully adopted and used by the intended beneficiaries, and that will have the greatest possible impact on their lives. Now, take a look at this diagram. We have nature at one end, technology on the other side, and institutions on the third side. The diagram, what does this diagram tell us? It basically tells us that all these three are interdependent on each other. Let us explore the elements in detail. Nature, when you talk of nature, see, nature, the resources are available to us, to all human beings, right? The natural environment, this provides the raw materials for human use and consumption, okay? This includes water, timber, minerals, crops, anything, okay? And all human activities depend on the natural environment. These activities can have significant impacts on the environment in terms of resource depletion, pollution and climate change. So they need to be used very cautiously. Now, technology. You have the nature in front of you, right? But you need technology to use this resource, right? So technology refers to the tools and techniques used to transform these natural resources into goods and services for human use. Only then they can be of some use. So in a way they are interdependent. Nature, we have the resources, but we need technology to use this resource. And last, institutions. These include government policies, regulations, laws, etc., social norms, cultural practices, etc. They play a crucial role in shaping the relationship between the humans and the environment by establishing the rules for resource use, okay, and regulating technological development. Now we can say that the transformation of things available in the environment require a balance between these three elements. Okay, now our next topic is the types of resources. These are divided on the basis of number 1, origin, number 2, exhaustibility. These two you have already done again in your previous standards. Then third is on the basis of ownership. Fourth is on the basis of the status of development. Okay, let us understand each one of them. Okay, the first classification is on the basis of origin. Like I already said, you have done it in your previous class. Let us just recall what it is. It is divided into biotic and abiotic. You have been learning about this already. Biotic resources are obtained from the biosphere, and this includes human beings, flora, fauna, etc. Whereas abiotic are all those things which are composed of non-living things like sunlight, air, rocks, minerals, etc. Okay, but again they are also important for our life and ecosystem. Okay, the second classification is on the basis of exhaustibility. This also you have done in your previous class. Again, this is divided into renewable and non-renewable resources. So renewable resources are those resources which can be replenished naturally and are not depleted by use. They don't get over. These resources include, for example, solar energy, wind energy, hydroelectricity, geothermal energy, etc. Okay, they are essentially, that is, renewable resources are essentially inexhaustible and can be used indefinitely as long as they are managed sustainably. Second is non-renewable resources. Again, these are just the opposite. These are those resources that cannot be replenished or are replenished very slowly over time. For example, fossil fuels such as coal, oil, natural gas, as well as minerals like iron, copper and gold. Okay, they are finite and can be depleted, that is exhausted by use. Once they are depleted, they cannot be replaced within a human time frame. The third classification is on the basis of ownership. We have 4 types here: individual or private ownership, community ownership, natural resources and international resources. Okay, so let's take the first one, individual or private ownership. As the word says, private resources are owned and controlled by individuals or private companies. This can include land, buildings, natural resources, property, etc. Okay, and they are used only for personal or business purposes and can be bought, sold or traded on the market. Second is community owned resources. Like, for example, you have the burial ground, you have the grazing ground, you have the parks, etc. Okay, these are all accessible to the whole community members. Simple. Third is national resources. As the word says, national, all resources belonging to the nation. These come under national resources, and nation has the legal powers to acquire even private property for public good. For example, if you want to make highways or canals, okay, when they are being constructed, these have, most of the land passes through private properties, right, private lands, okay, but these are again taken over by the government because it is for the development of the country. And lastly, you have the international resources. These are resources that are shared among multiple countries, and they may require international cooperation and management to ensure their sustainable use. These can include natural resources such as water bodies, forests, fisheries, cultural resources, as well as heritage sites, international cultural events, etc. Let us understand these. Let us take water bodies for example. Many rivers, lakes, and etc. These are shared by multiple countries, and their management and allocation can require international cooperation. For example, did you know that the river Nile, it is shared by 11 countries, and the management of its water resource has been a source of conflict and negotiation. Same way you have the World Heritage Sites. These are cultural and natural sites of outstanding universal value, and hence their preservation and management requires international cooperation, right? Third is international cultural events like the Olympics, the World Cup. All these require international cooperation and coordination. These events often require construction of new infrastructure, management of crowds and traffic and all, okay? So this is what you mean by the different international resources that are used. Lastly, classification on the basis of status of development. By status of development, actually you mean they are referring to the level of development and or you can say availability of a resource in a particular region or country, okay? So here also you have 4 types. First one is potential resources. When you, as the word says, potential meaning there is a possibility, okay? Possible resources, these are those that have not been identified or developed, okay, but they have the potential to contribute to economic and social development. Second is developed resources, the other way around. Developed resources are those that have been fully utilized and developed for the economic and social benefits. Third and fourth, you have stock and reserves. By stock, what do you mean? Stock means materials in the environment which have the potential to satisfy human needs. We have a stock of it, okay? But human beings do not have the appropriate technology to access these. Example, water. Water is a compound of 2 inflammable gases, that is hydrogen and oxygen, and which though can be used as a rich source of energy, we do not have the required technical know-how to use them, and hence we call it a stock. Again, reserves. Reserves are the subset of stock, that is, which can be put into use with the help of existing technical know-how, but the use has not been started. Example, water in the dams, forests, etc. It is a reserve which can be used in the future. So with this we come to the end of the type of resources, and we'll move on to our next topic, that is development of resources. Now we already know that resources are very essential, okay, because they satisfy our needs, but we humans have used them indiscriminately, because of which we have to face a lot of problems today, obviously. Now, what are these problems? Basically, there are 3. Number 1, some greedy people have overused these resources for their personal greed, and because of which they are getting over. Secondly, resources are in the hands of a few, and hence society is again divided into the 2 groups, that is the rich and the poor. Some which are जिनके हैंड्स में ज़्यादा रिसोर्सेज हैं वो रिच के अंडर कैटेगरी में आते हैं, जिनके पास कम है वो पुअर की कैटेगरी में आते हैं. एंड थर्ड reason for these problems is that due to over exploitation of resources, today we are having to face many crises like global warming, land degradation, etc. So now, is there a way in which we can save the resources? Yes, here we have a term called sustainable development. What does that say? It basically says that the use of resources use the resources in such a way that it does not damage our environment, and we also have some resources for our coming generations. Hence, we can say that resource planning becomes a necessity for sustainable development. Let us understand this. So now, from where did this idea of sustainability come up? Okay, where did it start? We are going to see in this slide. Now it so happened that in 1994 a meeting took place at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where heads from more than 100 countries met. Basically, the purpose was to address the urgent problems of environmental protection and socio-economic development at global level. The leaders, they got together, they had a discussion, and there they signed the Declaration on Global Climatic Change and Biological Diversity. Here it adopted the Agenda 21 for achieving sustainable development in the 21st century. So what is this Agenda 21? It basically is to combat the environmental change and poverty and diseases through global cooperation. Understand the words: through global cooperation on common interest, on the grounds of common interest, mutual needs and shared responsibility. That is, the environmental damage that is being caused and affecting the whole world, the poverty, the disease like corona, which was an issue to the whole world, these should be tackled through global cooperation, as these issues, they all share a common interest. There is a mutual need and a shared responsibility should be taken up. Only then can we combat it. Again, one major objective of this Agenda 21 was that every local government should draw its own local Agenda 21 to combat the issues in their own possible way, right? Coming to our next topic, which is resource planning. Now we have already seen that planning is very much necessary for sustainable development of resources, right? We saw that judicious use of resources also a must. Now, in a country like ours, where we have enormous diversity in the availability of resources, right? For example, there are some regions which have some resources, whereas they may lack other resources, right? For example, regions like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, these are rich in minerals and coal deposits, but they have acute shortage of some other vital resources, whereas Arunachal Pradesh, which has abundance of certain resources, it lacks in infrastructure development, right? Again, Rajasthan, which is very well endowed with solar and wind energy, but again it lacks water resources. Okay, hence this is what calls for balanced resource planning. Hence we need a balanced resource planning at every level, that is at national level, state level, regional level and local levels. Let us see this planning of resources, how it is done in India, in our next topic. Resource planning in India. So far we saw why resource planning is necessary. Now we will see how it is done in India. So to do the resource planning in India, we have 3 steps basically. The first step is identification and inventory of resources, that is across the regions of the country. For this, what do? We first do the surveying for the resources, then the mapping is done to know which resource is available where and check the quality and quantity, and lastly we do the measurement. Basically after this we make a list of all the resources available. Next, second step is evolving a plant structure. After all the research, once we know which resource is available where, we plan with technology, which technology will be needed, the kind of skilled manpower required, and the kind of institution we will need to set up. Again, thirdly, we have matching the resource development plans with the overall national development plans. That is, we check whether the resource plan that we made, okay, it matches with the national development plan for the country. Because the main aim is that after using the resources, there should be an overall development of the whole nation, not only few areas, right? So now we know that it is very important to have proper technology to use these resources. You know that India was a very rich. We know that India was a very rich nation before, right? Before the coming of the Britishers, we had a lot of resources, but again, Britishers used the resources to the fullest. They exported them and exploited them, and overall today there is a shortage of resources in our country, and hence this is the main reason that today it becomes necessary to conserve them. Only if we have the resources, then only can we have development. This has been a major concern for leaders even in the past, and even Gandhiji has said that there is enough for everybody's need but not for anybody's greed. He placed the greedy and selfish individuals and exploitative nature of modern technology as the root cause of resource depletion at the global level. So this is the resource planning in India. India has had a series of 5-year plans since its independence in 1947, and each one outlines the country's development goals and strategies for a 5-year period. If you look at the first 5-year plan, which was implemented in 1951, its main objective was to promote rapid industrialization, particularly in the areas of heavy industries such as steel, coal, power. Again, to develop agriculture and the rural economy, to promote social welfare programs such as education and health, etc. Okay, and the most recent 5-year plan also, which is the 12th 5-year plan for the period of 2012 to 2017. The main objectives of this has been to achieve faster, sustainable and more inclusive growth, improve the access to health and education, enhance gender equality and empowerment of women, and to improve the infrastructure, particularly in the areas of power, roads, railways and urban infrastructure.